Hello, it's a pleasure to be here at Digital Leaders. And today we're going to explore how we can redefine what success looks like in a workplace that's being transformed by digital technologies. My name's Anna Lundberg, and I have been challenging the 9 to 5 and reimagining success for at least the last decade. And it is a challenge, but also an opportunity to look at how we can redefine how we're working, how we look at things like productivity and success as the architects we are for a future-ready workplace. Now, back in 1930, Keynes predicted that we would be working a 15-hour work week by now, thanks to technology. Sadly, here we are still working, I would say, the typical 40-hour week. So we have the 9 to 5 that I'm always talking about from Monday to Friday. But of course, in recent news headlines, we hear of certain companies capping hours at, let's say, 80 hours. And at the other extreme, studies show, or at least there is one study that I found, that show that we're only productive for about 3 hours a day. Clearly, it's not about the hours that we're working, it's about how we work. And unfortunately, we are facing what Kathleen Hogan at Microsoft has called a human energy crisis. Burnout is rampant. Nearly 8 out of 10 employees have experienced burnout at least at some point, sometimes. And 1 in 2, so half of employees, if not more, I'd say, are open to leaving their organization. This is really a perfect storm of burnout, social unrest in some areas, economic uncertainty, all feeding into this. And this is despite technology, despite the so-called digital revolution and AI and automation. We are working more than ever before. And in this context of digital transformation, and I'm sure many other speakers will speak to this in far more detail than I am, there are some big challenges that we are facing. First, of course, we need to focus on upskilling, reskilling. So AI automation is replacing a lot of routine tasks. And as leaders, we need to ensure that teams have the skills that they need to operate effectively in a world that is driven more and more so by tech. But while we're looking at technical skills, we're also looking at digital literacy, of course, the ability to work alongside AI tools. And I'll talk in a moment about where I think we need to be focusing even more than in these areas when it comes to upskilling the workforce. Secondly, of course, we have the speed of change. And ironically, as an aside, every time I ask ChatGPT for a post or some text, it starts every single sentence, no exaggeration, with, in this world of unprecedented change and in this rapidly changing world. So clearly AI agrees with us. Change is happening, and it's changing faster than ever before. It's happening faster than ever before. It is relentless, and as leaders, we need to lead through that relentless change, which is a challenge for all of us. AI, digital tools mean, of course, that we need to adapt to this new world. How can we integrate those new technologies fast enough, whilst also maintaining operational stability, keeping our workforce aligned and upskilling and so on that we just talked about. And then finally, and a part of the conversation that has been dominating, importantly so, rightly so, is how we ensure the use of AI and data in an ethical context. How can we use these tools responsibly while maintaining trust with employees, with clients, with ourselves as human beings? So as AI is becoming more pervasive, of course, there are growing concerns about data privacy, algorithmic bias, and the ethical implications. And those are a key consideration as we look at how we can implement these new technologies in the workforce. Now, I've been studying these trends for, again, as I said, more than a decade, certainly pre-pandemic, the last few years of my business. I've been supporting individuals, in fact, in leaving the 9 to 5 altogether. Full transparency there. I left my corporate marketing job back in 2013, and I've been supporting others to do the same as they've been exploring new and squiggly career paths that look a bit different to how they looked in the past. I also worked and have been working with organisations to retain those employees and looking at how we can build people-first, human-centric workplaces. From a technical perspective, digital, I've always been on the techie side, I suppose, despite not having followed that path in my career ultimately. I was an early adopter, or I should say it was my dad really, of MS-DOS back in the 80s. I was certainly very techie for a marketing person, and I have, of course, now working for myself as well as with my clients, done my utmost to stay on top of the latest technologies and how I can use those in my business and how organizations are using those as well. And as I said when we started, of course, we have this, and I'm sure everybody says this at every point of history, but we really are at a pivotal moment of history. We have this challenge, these many challenges, but also a huge opportunity to take this pressure and make it into something positive. We have this chance to reimagine how we're working, how we're being productive, redefining even what it means to be productive. And imagine, let's say, a world where productivity was not measured by the hours that we work, but by the value we create. I don't think that's so crazy, and yet somehow it lands that way in the world that we're facing at the moment. So a world where success is defined not just by climbing the corporate ladder and making lots of profit at any cost, but really around concepts like purpose and nurturing well-being, and really taking that concept of success for individuals and organizations and finding a way to redefine what it means together, not one at the expense of the other. Because, of course, the 9 to 5 model is a relic, I would say, from the industrial era. It was built for factory work, clocking in, clocking out, very much suited to repetitive tasks, and I suppose you could argue to robots and artificial intelligence, although artificial intelligence, perhaps this is an ethical dilemma, can work beyond those 40 hours a week. But of course, today we're in a knowledge economy, and our work requires creativity, problem solving, flexibility, not rigid schedules. It's not about the number of minutes I'm spending at my desk in terms of the value I'm producing. And despite technology allowing us to have this constant connectivity, we're still clinging to this model, even though I would argue it no longer serves us. And I always find it fascinating to go back a little bit in time to the history of work. So bear with me as I dip into the long history of how we've been working, going right back, I'd say, to agrarian societies, where work, of course, was dictated by the natural cycles and seasons, daylight and the harvest and so on. In ancient Greece and Rome, of course, they had slaves, but the leisure time that the privileged classes enjoyed was very much valued. It was about philosophy and the arts. Work was a necessity and certainly not a virtue. So they had slaves, and it was, of course, the upper classes, the gentlemen, of course, who were able to profit and benefit from that privilege. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, where the 9 to 5 really was a positive development that helped improve labour conditions and bring a much needed structure to working life, which had unfortunately, perhaps due to the Protestant work ethic and that kind of work is my duty to God philosophy, become very much a drudgery. So work became synonymous with labour and toil rather than the concepts of purpose and fulfillment and so on that I am luxuriously exploring today. And of course, we've had the pandemic, which accelerated an evolution towards working more remotely, took away the commute for a period of months, if not years, and then most recently, the sudden onslaught, I would say, of artificial intelligence tool that's come far faster than we perhaps ever could have predicted. So it's not just about where and when we're working, but we can see that the model of work has evolved to such an extent over the years, and this 9 to 5, I would say, is a relic, but it's also a recent relic. It's a recent development and not really suited to humanity over all time and for all eternity into the future. So we might ask ourselves then, what might that world look like if the 9 to 5 is such a recent construct and yet it still doesn't fit or doesn't anymore fit today's economy that's so much more dynamic. And technology is advancing, employee expectations are shifting. We have this opportunity, this chance to really explore those new models of productivity. And I want to explore 5 key areas in particular where we can move beyond that 9 to 5. So again, it's not just about when and where, although that's a great place to start. So if we think about the office, traditionally work has been tied to physical locations. As a factory worker, I needed to go to the place where all the equipment was to work there on the production line, let's say. More recently, my partner worked in media in central London, and every day he'd be taking the train, he'd be commuting in to Oxford Circus, very dynamic, fun place to be in your 20s, but of course also wasting an hour there, an hour back, and having that stress as well. And the pandemic did show us that we can work productively, I would argue, and the data backs me up, from anywhere. And so let's face it, and I'm sorry if this is a surprise to you, it shouldn't be, remote and hybrid work is a trend that is here to stay. And that's in large part thanks to technology. Now, again, the second part of this that we're really focusing on, I say, in the debate, we're talking about where we're working, from home, from a beach as a digital nomad, and when we're working is the second one, right? So are we working those hours 9 to 5? Again, very much a relic of this positive development to only work 40 hours a week, although far from Keynes's prediction again of the 15 hours a week. And we all have different preferences, family situations, energy levels, time zones, etc., to consider. What matters now in this knowledge economy is not the hours we're working, it's the outcomes we're delivering. And so we need a culture of trust where managers and leaders are not tracking and monitoring mouse movements or your location, your IP address. We're really trusting people to work asynchronously and focus on the results they're delivering. Yes, we need a culture of belonging. We want to come together for moments of celebration as a team. Mentoring is really important in person. There are lots of moments when working synchronously together in person is valuable, but we don't need to be certain days all the time together working next to each other just for the sake of it. So we can move beyond the office and beyond the clock. Now, I want to take this further. And this to me is quite sad, but very natural, again, in the history of the evolution of work, I suppose. Work is a transaction, and 6 out of 10 employees see it that way, which is low, I'd say, because we basically have a contract where I agree to do this work and you agree to pay me, and that is the simple employee-employer transaction. But people, and it's not just Generation Z, want more than a salary, more than a paycheck. We want purpose, we want meaning, we want to do work that we feel makes a difference, that's aligned with our values. And the pandemic, I suppose, has made that clear to many more people as well. We need to see employees as whole people, show up as our whole selves, as the expression goes. And that's so, so important. This is not a resource we're talking about in the sense of equipment or money or anything like that. We're talking about human beings here who are whole people with chronic illnesses, with young children, with aging parents, whatever their particular circumstances. And that's important to how I do my work. Investing in my career development, nurturing my well-being, finding ways to motivate me in ways that are unique to me. All these things create engagement, productivity, trust, loyalty, and really unlocks our full potential in the workplace. So moving beyond that transaction towards something more synergistic, beyond the ladder as well. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents, I should say, worked in the same, not just job, career, but role and company their entire lives. It was all about climbing the corporate ladder. The 80s, 90s, we were loyal to one company until retirement, and when we got a happy pension and could retire into the countryside and live out our last years in peace. Unfortunately, that model no longer fits today. Work is not linear, it's squiggly. We have several careers, not just several jobs. And so we need to be focusing more on our transferable skills, adaptability being one of the most important skills for us as employees. Creating environments where employees can continue to learn and adapt and grow in those really dynamic, non-linear environments as well. That's far more important than a traditional CV with your formal qualifications and so on. It's about those transferable and very human so-called soft skills. And then finally, and I've touched on that, the traditional business models have, of course, focused on maximizing shareholder value. That's the raison d'etre of a company. But that neglects the broader impact on society, on the environment, not to mention employees and their well-being. And we want more than just financial performance now. We need to consider social responsibility, ethics, sustainability as part of the triple bottom line. And we see B Corp organizations and more corporate organizations waking up to this fact and creating these people first cultures, which is incredible to see, but we have a lot of work still to do. So those are the 5 dimensions, and as we can see, it's going beyond the 9 to 5 is more than just when and where we're working. For me, it's really an opportunity. It's a moment to reimagine, redefine how we look at work, how we think about productivity and success in a way that's flexible and above all human-centric, as well as being future-focused, not just trying to hodgepodge, cobble something together based in reaction to what's happened the last few years, but really taking the time to perhaps start again and build something new that will take us into the new era, whatever that holds. And so one of the key questions as digital leaders is, how can we lead in this digitally transformed workplace? And for me, it's not about simplistically learning to code and using the equipment and the best prompts to use with ChatGPT, which is very much a focus in my little world of solopreneurship. It is about leading this change as the human beings that we are, for the human beings who are in our workforce. So the question has to be, what kind of leaders do we need to be? And also, what kind of leaders do we want to be growing and nurturing for the future? And for me, that's about being this human leader. And it seems absurd to say it to some extent, but it really is about being more human rather than less so. It's more and more important to focus on these human skills in a world where digital is to some extent taking over. So for me, that starts with self-awareness, knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. We used to call them opportunities in my early corporate career. Knowing my limitations, perhaps, the shadow side of my strengths. Also related to technology, if we want to bring it back to that. What are my issues when it comes to that? Is there a confidence that's missing, a lack of knowledge and understanding, a fear, and how can I address that? But really having the self-awareness as a leader, where my strengths are and where perhaps my opportunities and the shadow side might hold me back. Curiosity. In this fast-paced world of relentless change, curiosity will help us to stay open-minded, interested, ask the right questions when it comes to technology, yes, and also when it comes to new generations, employees and customers. Staying curious, never resting on our laurels, never becoming complacent, and keeping that open mind to continuously learn and grow as individuals, as leaders, and as human beings. Which leads me to the third one, empathy. And I'm in the midst of reading Radical Candor, so I can't help but think a little bit about the difference between empathy and compassion. And I think perhaps it's rather compassion in that context that I would say here. But it's about caring personally while also challenging directly, as she says in the book. So the most important thing as a leader is to care about your people. Everything else can be going completely pear-shaped, but if I know that my manager, my leader cares about me, my career development, my growth, my personal circumstances, that is really the core to unlocking my engagement, my productivity, my happiness, dare I say it, in the office. So being an empathetic leader, caring about our people, in particular in the context where organizations perhaps need to be restructured, where there are redundancies, where people are afraid of new technology and what that means for their careers, really calling that out and caring and showing that you understand that and are doing what you can to help will go a long way. Adaptability, I've mentioned already. Again, in this world of unrelenting change, we cannot stay put where we are, and we can't be frustrated and stubborn in the face of that change. We need to adapt, we need to learn and grow and try again. It's about test and learn and pivoting and all those buzzwords from the world of startups and MVPs and so on. Really learning as individuals again, as human beings, to evolve with the changing world, let alone the changing workplace. And finally, accountability. And I think accountability in this context means something even more important. Rather than outsourcing content, social posts and so on at the smallest form, but bigger strategies and decisions and responsibilities to artificial intelligence and technology, we need to take even more responsibility now. It's all the more important to hold ourselves accountable, hold the technology to account, hold our teams to account. Be accountable for the decisions we're making and for the impact that those decisions are having on employees, on organizations, and, let's face it, on generations still to come. So this, if you take one thing away from this talk, is the point. We need to be more human, not less. And rather than focus, again, only on the basic and advanced programming skills and all these things that are, yes, very, very important, and many people will need to know those and understand those and get better at those things, all of us need to be focusing on our human skills of being curious and empathetic, of having that critical thinking and creativity, bringing our own authenticity and unique perspective, bringing, in essence, our humanness to bear, rather than get caught up in all the technology. I like to think that perhaps we could fulfill that vision of Keynes, and certainly going back to the Greek and Roman times, but in a more diverse and equal, inclusive way for all of us to be able to enjoy that leisure time, to be allowed to be creative, to fulfill our potential and have that bigger purpose, and use technology to do the drudgery, to toil away and to do the repetitive tasks. That's the way we want the direction of technology to go, I would say, rather than allowing it to take away our creativity and autonomy and the very things that make us fulfilled and enjoying our work, and letting us stay behind with working these long hours and doing the menial task. I feel like we have that back to front. So as we look to the future, of course, we know that the way we work and the way we lead needs to evolve. And so I've looked at the historical context here of this outdated 9-to-5 model, the key challenges we're facing, and importantly, those human traits that we need in order to thrive and lead this transformation. It's of course up to each of us to take these insights and apply them, and to lead with humanity in what is becoming an increasingly digital world. So I want us to reimagine work, as I've said, to shift from those outdated models to a more flexible, human-centric approach, to redefine success and move beyond those traditional metrics of hours and profit, and instead focus on the outcomes, the results, what really matters in terms of purpose and well-being. And again, to be more human than ever before, to be self-aware, to be curious, to be empathetic, to be adaptable to all these changes, and to hold ourselves to account as well, so that we can lead the change, to create these workplaces where we are ready for the future, that we are productive, but also doing meaningful and fulfilling work for all of us to thrive, individuals, organizations, and the businesses, the corporations. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, I'd love to continue the conversation, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person. You can connect with me here on LinkedIn to share your insights, ask your questions, and perhaps to explore working together and how we can lead this change together, how we can create these human-centric workplaces that are going to allow us to fulfill some of these bold, but also I think pretty simple ambitions that I've expressed today. Thank you so much to the Digital Leaders team for having me, and here's to redefining what success looks like. Bye for now.